Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to True Crime Loser. Good to see you. So, today we are heading back to Florida. Palm trees, swamps, strip mall hell, beautiful, crazy, wild Florida. And we've spent a lot of time in Florida. The Dippolitos live in Florida. I guess I have no idea if he still lives in Florida. But anyway, we're headed back to our old stomping grounds. To get us into the Florida vibe today, I wanted to tell a quick story of probably my favorite true crime story, and it takes place in Florida, and it's a guy named John LaRoche, and a woman named Susan Orlean wrote a New Yorker article about the case, which was really popular, and then she wrote a book about the article, which was really popular, and then they made the book into a movie. The guy that wrote Being John Malkovich wrote it, and it's called Adaptation. But the case is really interesting, and just a interesting guy named John LaRoche grew up in Florida and by this swamp called the Fakahatchee Strand. And there's a few flowers that the only place they grow in the entire world is this Fakahatchee Strand. And so people come from all over the world to see this orchid. It's called the ghost orchid. And no one really can find it. And it's endangered and it's protected. You can't take it or touch it. And this guy named John LaRoche, he grew up right by the swamp. He probably more than anyone, at least at the time of this, could find it. He could find this flower in the wild, and it would take like 5 to 8 hours of slogging through swampland, like water up to here, and gross black mud that smells horrible, and there's spiders and alligators, and it's not an easy day outing to see this flower, but people are just obsessed with this orchid. And at the time we pick up on this story, John LaRoche has no front teeth because he got in a car accident that was his fault that killed his mom. He's divorced. At one time, he was about to start this huge greenhouse plant nursery, and then a hurricane destroyed it. He ended up at one point starting a porn company, posting like porn way back when the internet and porn found each other. Just a wild dude, no front teeth, chain smokes, always has some scam going. So this guy, John, who can find this flower, and possibly the only one that knows how to clone it, hatches up this plot to poach a flower, and then this flower that everybody loves, and then clone a bunch of them so it's not endangered anymore. People don't want to poach it, so the ones that are in the wild survive. People can enjoy it, but it's illegal for him to take one from the wild and start cloning it. But he figures out there's this case where a Seminole Indian, the Seminole Indians have been in Florida for a really long time, and they don't quite play by the same rules as just normal Americans because they have their own culture, and I think the justice system tries to respect that. So anyway, the Seminole Indian shot and killed a panther, and which is very illegal. You can't just go out and shoot a panther, but he was a Seminole Indian, and they were just like, yeah, I mean, this is what they do. They shoot panthers. We wouldn't do it, but we can't throw him in jail. So he didn't get in trouble. It was like this Seminole chief shot this panther, didn't get in trouble. And so John LaRoche hatches this plan where he goes to the Seminole Indians and says, let's start a greenhouse on the reservation where the laws really don't apply. And you guys will come with me. We'll go into the Fakahatchee Strand. I'll show you where these flowers are. I'm not going to touch them. You guys, take them down. We'll bring them back to the greenhouse. I'll clone them a bunch of times so they're not endangered. We'll save the flowers. We'll save the people that want these flowers. Everybody wins. And so him and a couple Seminole Indians go out in the Fakahatchee, fill pillowcases with these endangered flowers that are really illegal even to touch, let alone to cut down and bring out. And as they're walking out, all muddy, a cop pulls up, or a forest ranger or something, and he pulls out, flips the lights on, pulls over, and they're standing there with these pillowcases just full. And the cop's like, "What's in the pillowcases, boys?" And John LaRoche, with his missing front teeth and his cigarette's like, "Oh, they're all endangered orchids and bromeliads and many different species." And the cop's kind of stunned that he told the truth. And the cop's like, "Well, you know that it's highly illegal to touch, let alone to remove the flowers from the..." And John LaRoche is like, "Yeah, very illegal. Also, don't forget that they're all endangered." And the cop's like, "Yeah, I know." And John's like, "Well, but you are aware of the state of Florida against Chief Seminole Indian, blah, 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 the case where..." And he's like, "My associates here are members of the Seminole tribe." And the cop is sitting there kind of just scratching his head. And then he's like, "Oh, just hold on a second." And he has to call for backup. And the story just goes from there. But it's really interesting. The book, I think, is called Orchid Thief by Susan Orlean. The movie has Nicolas Cage playing two parts and Meryl Streep. And it's a great movie. Anyway, let's get into the case that we're starting today. That was just a little warm-up to get us in the Florida vibes. So today, we open at the Sheraton Hotel, which is just a middle of the road. I've stayed at a million of them. The type of hotel where you go in and you can smell the pool. They have a continental breakfast. The eggs are a little weird, but the sausage is good. Just a middle of the road hotel. And it's the day after Thanksgiving, and Michael Dunn and his girlfriend are getting ready for a wedding. Michael Dunn's son is getting married. And so I picture the girlfriend in the bathroom putting on makeup and doing her hair, and the room probably smells like shampoo and soap from their showers mixed with French fries from room service. And Michael Dunn, who's a big, jowly man with a gut. He's kind of one of those guys that has got a gut, but his legs have stayed the same size, so he looks a little bit like a cupcake on normal size legs. And I picture him just wearing only his dress shirt and underwear and black dress socks pulled up, pacing around the hotel room, practicing his speech, doing the little facial expressions and grimaces people do when they're picturing themselves public speaking in their head. He's probably practicing his speech. And you got to think it's a good day. His son is getting married. The reason they came up a day before the wedding is they have a little dog named Charlie. So little Charlie's probably laying there on the bed. And they're just getting ready for this wedding. We've all been there. And they head out for the wedding about 3:15 in the afternoon. They leave Charlie in there in the hotel. And they drive, and the wedding takes place in an old house by the water, 50 people or less, small ceremony. I'm sure there was dancing and speeches and the whole 9 yards. I've been to so many weddings in the past 5 years that they all just run together. But food and the speeches and the dancing and people, loosening their ties, and probably just a nice ceremony. And it's wild to think how a night where you see your son get married could turn into what it does. But at a certain point in the night, Michael Dunn, after watching his son get married and his girlfriend decide little Charlie, the dog, has been left alone for too long in the hotel. He's not used to it. He was just a little puppy. So they say their goodbyes, their congratulations, and they head out. The girlfriend has had maybe like 5 rum and cokes, a glass of red wine, and she estimated that Michael had 3 or 4 rum and cokes. He said he didn't. I think he said he had 1 or 2 in the interrogation, but I feel like most of us would just lie to the cops and be like, yeah, I only had 1. But, they've been drinking. I guess we'll probably never know the exact amount. And so they take off out of there and head back to the Sheraton. On the way to the Sheraton, they stop at a gas station, a big gas station that is also kind of a store. And it's in a strip mall. And they pull into this store. And if you look at overhead views of this store, there's a lot of parking options. Florida, at least the parts that I've seen outside of Miami, parking is not an issue. It's like my hometown. They're just parking spaces for miles. And so with parking not an issue, as they pull in, there's an SUV that's playing music in one of the front parking spots. And audible music, you can hear it. And in that car is 4 teenagers. And they're blasting music, which is what teenagers do. My stereo in my car when I was 16 was insane. The whole cool thing where I grew up is that you put an aftermarket stereo system in your car. And so when I turned 16, I had a 1994 Saturn twin cam that my older sister had before me, and then she was going off to college, so she got a new car. So I got this 94 Saturn twin cam, and it's essentially made of plastic. You could like knock on the car and it sounded like you were knocking on a Hot Wheels. And so I got this car, and immediately I went online and I ordered 2 12-inch subwoofers, which is huge for a car that size. That's enough for like a rock concert. And so I ordered 2 subwoofers, 2 6x9 speakers. That's what we'd call them, 6x9s. Do you have 6x9s? And a giant amp to power it all. And then a giant wiring kit, all the wires to put it in. So I get all this stuff in the mail, and my friend, you could bring it into like an auto shop or a stereo shop and have them install it. But my friend, his name's Zach, was like, dude, I think we can do it. Just come over to my house on Sunday and we'll get it all installed. So I go over to Zach's house and we start ripping out like the whole inside, because you got to run wires from the trunk all the way like through the inside of the car, through like the wall that separates the inside of the car from where the engine is. You got to run all these wires and stuff. So we're taking off the panels of my car, and we think we got this, and we just run into all sorts of problems. We don't know how to basically do any of it. And so what we thought was going to be pretty quick turns into like 6 hours of us trying to figure out this. And then finally Zach's dad comes home, who was a master mechanic. So this is his Sunday. I don't know what he was doing all day, but he comes home. It's like late Sunday. He's got to work on cars the whole week. And we're sitting there like, he comes home and my car, all 4 doors are open. There's like panels and wires everywhere, and we're just sitting there like, we need help. and his name's Bunk. Bunk sat there for the next 5 hours with us on his back, working, and got us all straightened out. Showed us how to put the ground wire in, showed us how to connect the wire to the back of the CD, ran the wire correctly. I would have had wires running everywhere. It would have looked terrible. So he did it, a nice professional job, worked 4 hours on his Sunday night and got us all straightened out. So thank you. But after we got that thing set up, I would rattle the windows of my neighbors. People used to, I had neighbors complain to my parents of me getting home late at night, and I used to drive just thumping. Drive past my parents' house to the end of the street and flip a U-turn going like 75. And then pull up and park on the street. And multiple neighbors asked my parents if they could ask me to slow down and to also turn down the music. But the point is, my stereo was just insane. We used to just rock like Ice Ice Baby, had a really good bass, and Regulators by Warren G, and just a bunch of like Earth, Wind, and Fire type stuff. So I was just rocking the bass. And the point is, that's just what teenagers do. They like loud music, and they are hard-headed, and they're usually a little drunk. And it's just part of being an adult is knowing that, and knowing that you're not going to get, if you try to like tell a teenager like turn down the music, or if you even engage with them, it's usually not going to turn out the way you want. Like if I'm sitting on the subway here in New York and 7 teenagers get on the train and they're loud, and 2 of them are wrestling and another 2 are slapboxing and falling all over people, and they smell like Malibu rum, I don't tell them to be quiet, even though it's annoying. I just know at the point they're at in their life, they're not trying to hear it from a 30-year-old dude sitting on the train like, hey, be quiet, you're annoying me. It's just teenagers. What are you going to do, huh? Well, Mike didn't know that. So Mike pulls up right next to this car that's bumping loud music. They're probably just out cruising around, causing a little mischief. Who knows? And so Michael Dunn pulls up, parks right next to him, and as his girlfriend's getting out of the car, he says to her, I hate this thug crap, referring to their rap music. And she testifies that she says, I know, as a way to, that was kind of his thing. Like, I think he just was overall, he didn't like rap, he didn't like that culture. He's probably a little racist. He kind of has that little bit of an old racist vibe. But maybe he's not racist and he just doesn't like that culture, but I don't know. Who knows? So he pulls up, doesn't like that thug crap music. She goes in to buy a bottle of wine so they can go back and have a nice, relaxing night in their hotel room with Charlie. So she goes off to buy a bottle of wine, and Michael Dunn sitting there. You got to think that he's all dressed up still, probably's got the tie loosened, and he, I guess, just can't handle the live music or the loud music. And even though his son just got married and it's this beautiful night and he's in Florida and he's about ready to go hang with Charlie, that loud music is just too much for him. He just can't handle it. Instead of pulling out of the spot, like, the hell with this, I'm just going to park in another spot down the way, or maybe I'll just get out and go into the store. Instead of the million other choices to get away from the loud music, he rolls down his window and asks them to turn it down. And you get his side of the story in the interrogation, how he worded it, and you get the teenager's side when they testify, but we don't really know. But he asked them to turn it down, which they did. And then one of the kids in the car, which seems to me like a total normal teenager reaction, gets mad that he told him to turn it down and says, turn it back up, starts talking shit. And Michael and this guy get into it. They get into an argument. And Michael's story is that the kid started saying, like, fuck this dude, and, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to kill you, bitch. Kill that bitch or something. And then brought up a shotgun and said, you're dead, bitch. And then at that point, fighting for his life, Michael Dunn pulled out his 9mm that he always keeps in his glove box. He used to always carry it, but he told the cops in the interrogation that his gut had gotten too big recently, so now he doesn't carry it. He puts it in the glove box, which has got to be a sad moment for a guy that kind of carries himself like a cowboy, the moment that you can't carry your gun anymore. So he pulls this gun out, shoots the SUV 4 times. The SUV is like, what? And pulls out and drives away. He shoots in the back of the SUV 4 more times. And his girlfriend hears the shots in the car. They think there's like a mass shooting or something going on. And is like, oh my God, is that coming out of Michael's car? She leaves the bottle of wine and the chips that she bought, runs out. Michael says, get in the car. She says, what's going on? Michael says, get in the car. She gets in the car and they drive away. At no point, she testifies that at no point did Michael tell her that they had a gun, that he saw a gun, which is probably one of the key informations for the prosecution. Because if someone showed you a shotgun and you defended your life by filling their car full of bullets, it would probably be the first thing that you would say to your significant other. I just saw a shotgun. But he didn't say it. He didn't say he saw a shotgun. He didn't say he saw a gun. He didn't say he saw a stick or anything. And so they drive back to the hotel. So imagine the vibes leaving that hotel all dressed up, ready to go to a wedding, versus the vibes coming back to the hotel. The girlfriend's about ready to have a panic attack. She thinks that they should call the cops. Michael his anxiety, obviously, is through the roof. They get back to the hotel. He takes Charlie for a walk. She changes her clothes and just sits by. There's like a little place to sit outside of the room right by the elevator. She sits there just thinking the cops are going to come, guns blazing, and arrest them any second. They're barely even talking to each other. And she's just freaking out, as you can imagine. I just can't imagine the feeling of just them getting back to the hotel and just how much has changed. And her stomach hurts, so they order a pizza. So Michael Dunn calls and orders a pizza. And the pizza comes. They eat some of the pizza. Still have no idea what the damage of all those bullets that he sent into that car are. And they eat a little bit of the pizza. He pours them a stiff rum and coke, I think it was, and they go to bed. The girlfriend manages to fall asleep. She's not really aware if Michael slept too much. She wakes up in the morning in the hotel room, probably a little hungover, probably with that feeling of like, damn it, it's real. It wasn't all a horrible dream. And Michael is in the bathroom throwing up or attempting to throw up, and the news is on saying how a teenage boy was shot and killed in a parking lot of a gas station. And you can imagine just the feeling of that hotel room. And so now, and still, instead of calling 911 and being like, hey, I was defending myself, they had a gun, they had a something, they still don't call the police, and they check out of the room, drive, I think, a couple hours back to where they live, and Michael calls their neighbor, which works in law enforcement in some capacity, and asks him for advice on what to do, what's the best way to handle it. And while they're kind of figuring out that, the cops come with AR-15s out to their place, and he surrenders. And he's brought in for interrogation. And what makes this interrogation different is this is the first one we've gone through where he's essentially saying, yes, I did do it, but I was scared for my life, I was defending myself, I was standing my ground, and I shot them. And it's an interesting spot to be in a police interrogation, because it's a fine line between those two. You can't just shoot a kid because you felt a little scared, but you also have to be able to defend yourself. That's just how it's got to be. You can't. And so he's stuck sitting there knowing that he has to convince these two homicide detectives that he was defending himself, and he gets to go home. And if he fails at that, it's murder, which, in my opinion, is very interesting and just heightens the stakes. And he is sitting there, palms sweaty, ready for the performance of his life. And I think the cops do a really good job, or the detectives do a really good job of letting him tell the story, and then starting to pick the parts of the story that they have issues with. And I think it's pretty interesting. Yeah, I'm going to cut it off there. So we'll get into the interrogation. His girlfriend also was interrogated. I haven't listened to that yet. I'm going to check that out. Also, his girlfriend on the stand, I think, is probably worth a watch at some point during this thing. But we'll get into this, get into the interrogation tomorrow. See his strategy to, like I said, just try to convince the detectives that my life was in danger and I should get to go home today. All right. Well, to everybody that supports this channel in all capacities, I really appreciate it. I hope you have a good day. True Crime Loser out. Why, Stiving, why? Shmita?